Shanda and Bob Babbitt here, which I'm excited about. To talk about basically how do you grow businesses? How do you stay in your passion as you're really building out something that's important to you? And I'm going to ask Bob, I'm going to actually let you explain a little bit who you are. You're world famous in my world of triathlons and endurance sports, but you're going to be new to some of our audience that do some endurance sports, but a lot of them actually are still in the gym versus out on the road. So I'm excited to talk to you about all of that. But with all of that being said, if you're just tuning into Coffee with Shanda, I do this Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. for 20 minutes. And we help you build your businesses, but we also help you build your mind. So today we're going to talk about your mind, your body, and your spirit. So Bob, welcome to Coffee with Shanda.
Well, thanks, Shanda. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, and I found out just before we went live that you have Breakfast with Bob. I just love that.
We've been doing Breakfast with Bob show originally from the Ironman in Hawaii. We started that 9 years ago, and we interview all the top contenders each morning. We do, like last year, we did 58 interviews over 5 days and a championship edition at the Four Seasons. So it's really, really a ton of fun.
That's awesome. We actually teach people how to build their online presence through doing interviews, and they do like 21 interviews over 3 months. So I love that you said 58 in 3 days.
Yeah. Well, what I found early on when we were growing competitor, and we were chatting about this before we went live, is, we had been with a magazine called Running and Triathlon News. It went out of business. And I just had this gut about the sport of triathlon. And I don't know where the gut came from, because when I finished my first Ironman in 1980, there was 108 of us in the race. And the year before, there was only 15. But I just felt like finishing that thing and not knowing if I could do it. It was like it's a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, and a 26.2 mile run. And back then there was no aid stations. You had your own crew with you the whole time. Wow. I thought you did it in 2 days. I thought you swam 2.4, rode 56, camped out, rode back the next day, and did the marathon. So I had a police auction bike. That whole thing was burnt out of the back end and had panniers, sleeping bag, and tent, because I thought you camped out at 56 miles into the bike ride. And my crew gave me a Big Mac, fries, and a Coke 25 miles into the bike ride, and a root beer snow cone at mile 90. Had flat-proof tires on the bike because they had no clue how to change a tire. Got a 45-minute massage between the bike and the run. But when I finished, I felt like I had this business card that told me, you didn't know you could do this. Now you completed something. You changed your perception of you. You did something you never thought you could do. And I came back, and a guy locally named Mike Plant had a magazine called Running News. And I'm like, dude, you got to change the name to Running and Triathlon News, because this sport's going to be huge. And I left teaching, became his LA editor for Running and Triathlon News. And the next thing I know, we're driving up to LA every week covering running, triathlon, cycling, early 80s, just as the sport is growing. So that led to competitor. When Running and Triathlon News went out of business, I went and met with a couple of publishers of cycling magazines, California Bicyclists and Southwest Cycling, and said, guys, if we did a magazine that combined running, triathlon, and cycling, that could be really powerful. And both publishers told me the same thing. We'll never put a skinny runner on the cover of our magazine. Triathlon's a fad. It'll be gone in 5 years. And the only sport that matters is cycling. And we came home, and I was pretty bummed, and some friends gave us a check for $17,000 and said, go start your own magazine. And the next month, we came out, June of 87, the first edition of Competitor Magazine. We were in a guy's garage underneath 10,000 pounds of bike racks, and we were paying $200 a month for 200 square feet, and we didn't have a thing. My partner Lois and I didn't pay ourselves for a year and a half. But we just believed. We loved it. And we built that from 1 edition to 11 editions of Competitor Magazine, 500,000 circulation around the country. And in 2008, we became the Competitor Group with then 7 rock and roll marathons, 7 of the Muddy Buddy series that I had started, Competitor Radio, which I created locally here because I wanted to showcase our amazing athletes on a national sports radio platform so people would know who Paul Newby-Frazier and Dave Scott and people like that were. Yeah. And it grew organically because, we never had a meeting where we said, how are we going to make more money? It was always, how do we make the magazine better? How do we make Muddy Buddy better? how does rock and roll, when rock and roll became part of the formula, how does rock and roll grow to become what it is today? And really from 2008 to 2012, the rock and roll grew from 7 rock and rolls to 34 to 650,000 participants.
I have a question for you. So as entrepreneurs are watching this and as I'm watching this, like these are extraordinary growth spurts. So I'm hearing some key things like focus on who your customers, your client is and or your runner is to be able to really serve them as you're growing this business. I'm hearing we didn't even pay ourselves. We were just so hooked into the vision. I get that. I worked for a company, Coldwell Banker, for 6 months building a division. And when I started hiring people for the division, I realized I wasn't getting paid because I was so connected to the vision, and we actually worked that out afterwards, and I became a VP of the company. But so I understand all that, but the explosive growth, what do you contribute like that type of stuff happening other than organic? Like I get that, but like
Sure.
what?
Well, if you specifically, probably the biggest growth is rock and roll. And what I think spurred the growth of rock and roll, if you look at the early days of rock and roll, Tracy Sunland and Tim Murphy, who created rock and roll, they also hooked up with Leukemia Team and Train. And so the charity was a huge part of it. There was no, really, think about those Boston Marathon, New York Marathon, they're all one-offs. There wasn't any series of marathons where you could get a like experience around the country. So with the charity component, all of a sudden, the demographics changed. When I first got into this, it was 90% guys and 10% women. Now, with the charity component, a lot of women were like, well, I understand this running because I'm helping people with cancer. I'm helping people get past lymphoma. I'm going to become part of Team and Training. So then the demographics, which was 90% men, 10% women, became 70% women and 30% guys, which is what the current demographic is. And what happened is, I think, when I first got into running for the cause and realized they loved it, realized the social implications that, hey, we can go for the weekend. And what that did is it also changed the demographics of the expo. Because if you think about it, if I'm going to an expo, I'm going with my buddy because we don't want to pay for parking. And the two of us one's going to jump out of the car and the other one's going to drive around the block. I'm going to run in and get my stuff and I'm going to be out there in 3 seconds. And then we're going to switch. Where the groups of women coming in are like, I'm shopping, I'm hanging. And all of a sudden you've got great success for the expos. People are buying tons of merchandise. Things change. And it's been an amazingly positive change because now look at all the women who are race directors for great events and who are changing the face of running. And also the charity component's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. So I love all of it. And I think the change in demographics then what happens when you get 60, 70% women doing these events, you're reaching out to title sponsors. You've got different title sponsors. You've got folks who are looking for the person who's a decision maker on what's happening. What are the purchases in a home? The woman is making those decisions. So now It changed everything, and in a positive way. And it also went away from, if you look at time, it also became, marathon used to be that term of, that's for an uber athlete. That's not for me. And same with Ironman. Then it became, well, wait a second. Why can't that be for me? Why can't I do that? Because you don't need a special skill to do our sports, right? You need to be 6'8" to play basketball. You need to have amazing hand coordination to play baseball or football. I always tell people for triathlon, if you wore arm floaties as a kid, if you had a paper route and you played capture the flag, you've got our skill set. There's nothing else that you need to become a triathlete. If you swim, ride, and run a little bit every day, you'll get better. It's just, it's just perfect. And I think it was a perfect storm. In the 80s and 90s, people were looking for a new change in their lives. So it's again, I think it's just an amazing information.
Well, I'm hearing you say there's some strategic partnerships too. There's some strategic partnerships with you guys going into Rock and Roll Marathon. You have the series, so now you've got a goal of doing the series. The series also has like it's almost like walking into a good restaurant. It's the same experience every time you go. There's a familiarity. I mean, we even set up our masterminds for our business masterminds to be exactly the same setup because there's a familiarity when you walk in the door all the time that people feel comfortable with. But then it's like, then you add a cause to it, you change the demographics to a demographic where women are consumers. I mean, we like to collaborate, we like to consume, we like the experience, where my husband can sleep in a shitty old hotel. I'm like, no, I would like the Four Seasons or the Fairmont, or I want the experience, right? So I get that. So you are inspiring for a lot of different reasons, business wise, obviously, but also the fact I asked you the question before we came live, which was, are you still doing endurance sports? Because of the fact that there's conversations out there that say, if you are doing endurance sport, there's two sides. There's if you do endurance sports, it's the only way to keep bone density into your old age because you can't rebuild bone density. But then there's all these articles about how these type of sports actually kill you. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, and it's funny because there's heart people have had heart issues, and you as you get older, if you use the body in the wrong way, you can need a hip replacement, knee replacement. We've seen a lot of that. I personally have tried to keep. I think the toughest part is the running. And as somebody who raced 35 times last year, and I love racing every weekend, I really don't run much in between events. I try to swim and ride, and do some weights and things like that. But the running is that pounding is the toughest part. So for me, I've always just tried to keep running to a minimum and race as much as possible. I like racing because I look at them as catered workouts. Someone's giving me something. I don't have to worry about carrying. Someone's giving me bananas. Someone's giving me an orange. Someone's giving me something to drink. If I'm going out for a workout, I got to carry all that crap with me, or I figure out where to get it. I don't have to think about any of that stuff. So I love and when I go to our races now, I'm in what I call the 65 to death category. And that category is getting bigger every day. We've got more and more guys, and our sport's adapting. Because of running, you find a lot of guys over 60 years old can't run anymore. Well, we've created a thing called aqua bike, what I call it, swim, bike, done. You don't do the run. You do 1.2 mile swim, 56-mile bike, and put your flip-flops on and go to breakfast. So the key is to keep people in. I find by going to the events every weekend, it keeps you young because you're hanging out with young, right? If you're hanging out you're 75 years old and you're hanging out with other 75-year-olds, you're talking about your blood pressure medication. You're not, right? That's really what it comes down to. I'm hanging out with places, people are comparing split times, and that was great. Did you see that? The turnaround at this point or the down. It just keeps you very, very excited.
Do you think so? That's a great point, because so I don't want to dive too much into this, but I just had this conversation with a guy by the name of Dan Sullivan who owns Strategic Coach. And he actually, as part of his strategy, he hangs out with people who are much younger than him and his wife. And their whole circle is much younger. And he's like really committed to living much longer than average life. And he's got all this data on if you hang out with young people and do what young people do, you end up staying young. So I think that's powerful. You race every weekend.
I try to. I love racing. In fact, I'm freaking out because this weekend I can't. I'm going to go to Barbara to do a bike ride with a bunch of our, our CA Challenge Athlete Foundation supporters. But I'm like, well, I got to find a race on Sunday. I got to find a Father's Day race on
Sunday. Awesome.
I like it a lot.
That's so awesome. Yeah, you're definitely upping my game. That's so awesome.
Races are sort of a little bit of a microcosm because you wake up. The alarm goes off and you go, do I really want to be doing this? I've done thousands of races. Do I really need to prove anything to myself? And then you get there and you're like, the waves look big. You're going through that questioning phase and then the endorphin phase. You get in the water and you're going, oh my God, this is a long swim. And then you start breaking things down. I find that sport translates from the perspective of when I was doing an Ironman race, if I sat there and said, oh my God, it's 140.6 miles. I'm defeating myself over and over and over again. But I'm starting the swim. It's 2.4 miles. I'm a quarter way through the swim. I'm halfway to the turnaround. Everything becomes a positive. Every little dot that you're playing Pac-Man, and every little dot becomes something really cool. And then you're like, I'm out of the water. Now I'm riding a bike. Oh, look at that guy's got a 24 on his calf. Well, 3 of him equal my age. I like that. So you gain positives from throughout that race and throughout that experience. and you finish and it's been this cathartic day that's happened in an hour, right? Everybody else is just rolling to bed and you've just had this amazing experience and it's 9 o'clock in the morning. So how
Yeah.
cool is that?
And created, and the race community is just so fun to be with. I mean, the breakfast or the coffee shops after the rides, and it's just there's nothing I've ever experienced in any other sport that's been anything like that. But what do you say to people who are like, I'm not a triathlete, I'm not even really an athlete, like, how do they get into a sport like this and actually experience it? Because it does translate to business. I was telling you, the last year trying to get pregnant, I've not been doing endurance sports. And it's like, I literally, hand on a Bible, I literally was sitting with my accountant yesterday as we were making decisions on pricing on some things. And she's like, are you doing this or are you doing this? And I'm like, oh, I was like, you know what? Just give me to Friday to think about this. And then she looked at me and she goes, so funny. You're usually like such a fast decision maker. I'm like, it's endurance sports. I said that. I said, I'm not doing endurance sports. And if I'm not doing endurance sports, it brings down my ability to fire and not become a bottleneck.
No, I agree. I think it keeps you young. I call our sport the fountain of youth, just because it does keep you young. And when you're doing, and again, you can do it forever. Swimming, there's really no reason you can't swim forever and be just as fast, right? And as a cyclist, I know I'm a better cyclist now than I was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Equipment's light, right? Better wheels. You start joining what I call the Zwift Nation, where you're riding indoors and you're training with other folks. They're the endorphins, and when people talk about the negatives of endurance, and I've seen what endurance does for the athletes of our Challenge Athletes Foundation. When we get these guys, a guy comes back from Iraq or Afghanistan, and he's lost a leg. He's stepped on ID and lost a leg. And a perfect example, a guy named Eric McElvaney came back in November of 2011. By February, he was already fitted with a running leg. By spring, he did his first triathlon. The following fall, he did a half Ironman, and the following fall, he did the Ironman with his hero, Hines Ward, from the Pittsburgh Steelers. And now he's traveling the world. His kids love what he does. It's the coolest thing ever. So I see the power of sport, and I see it every day, especially again with our Challenge Athletes Foundation.
That's powerful. So that tells everybody that none of us have an excuse when you see something like that happen,
That's
right?
exactly it. Because the deal is we do a bike ride down the coast for CAF, 110 riders, pay $12,500 each. The event sells out. San Francisco to San Diego, and
I've been wanting to do that one. I have been wanting to do
it's
that
the
one.
thing on the planet. You're
When
riding with
is
Bill
it?
Walton. It is actually the week of October 13th to 20th. Yeah. And so you're riding down the coast. You're each day you're doing a police escort over to Golden Gate Bridge to start out. And then each day they're meeting you for lunch. And then when you're done each day, your masseuse is waiting for you. Your bags are in your 5-star hotel room. Your mechanic's tuning your bike up for next day. Plus, the whining factor goes away when you've got a guy who's a paraplegic next to you on a hand cycle, right? And you're thinking, oh, my bag should have been put in this room. It's the whining coefficient disappears when you're riding next to a guy who's missing a leg and is kicking your butt. So and that was really important to me when we first started TAF. Back in the day, when we realized when a friend of ours was injured, he'd already been an amputee. Jim McLaren, he lost his leg, get hit by a New York City bus when he was on his motorcycle back in 1985. Came back from that with a walking leg to run a 3:16 marathon and go 10:42 in Hawaii, and then he got injured again. He was racing in Orange County, and a van went through a closed intersection, hit the back of his bike, propelled
Jeez.
him pulled him quadriplegic. Guys are an amputee became quadriplegic. So 3 of us got together here in San Diego, and the goal was to raise 25 grand to buy Jimmy a van with hand controls. Because the first thing you lose when you become a paraplegic is independence. Mom and dad come back in your life, no sense of self or independence. So the goal was 25 to buy this van. We raised 49, thought our job was done, and then 3 amputee women came to us and said, Jimmy's our hero. He got us into endurance, but did you know if you get injured, your health insurance will cover a walking around leg or an everyday chair, but sports is considered a luxury item and nothing is covered. So since then, we have raised $95 million. We've sent out 23,000 grants just this year alone, 2,806 grants, totaling $4.3 million to keep challenge athletes in the game of life through sport. And I've seen that power of sport. I've seen how you have a little double amputee boy who's at school trying to run on walking legs against the other kids, and then he gets running legs, and it levels the playing field. It changes everything. So that
Wow.
power of sport, because that endurance sports through triathlon and through cycling events, and that has led to the success of the Challenge Athletes Foundation.
Bob, I swear to God, you should actually get into business coaching people who have the same passion as you, because you've been able to create some pretty extraordinary things around your life. And that takes, there's probably, I'm sure there's a lot of crossover in the reason why you're racing every single week. There's got to be some crossover in how you deal with adversity and how you deal with challenges to be able to create extraordinary results, because it's awesome to watch you.
Well, you know what's fascinating is, I think, and that was one of the things that surprised me when we sold to private equity, is the lack of integration in big companies. Everybody's in their own silo. They're not talking to each other. And everybody's about, I need to get my success, and I'm not going to tell you what I'm up to because that could hurt me, when it comes to my paycheck. And when you're a small company and you're thinking about, okay, I've got a Muddy Buddy series, and the official charity is going to be CAF, and we're going to bring different brands in as sponsors of Muddy Buddy, who are also going to sponsor CAF. And you're always thinking about how to integrate. You're always thinking about, and at the end of the day, that's the other thing I learned from selling is, when we sat down to sell the company, and they asked me for all of my contracts with all of my vendors, I'm like, that won't take long. I don't have any contracts. I have handshakes, right? That was my printer, my writers, my photographers. If I didn't pay my print bill, my printer wasn't going to print my magazine. If he
Yeah.
screwed up on his job, we'd work it out. But
Yeah.
it comes this common belief that I think there's this survivor TV mentality of, it's me against you. And you see it everywhere. I need to win and you need to lose. My
Yeah.
feeling has always been, I want you to win. It's
That's
important for you to win. And obviously I want to win as well. But if all of us work together to promote, to get challenge athletes the equipment they need, to grow the sport of triathlon, and everybody's not just thinking about their own agenda. They're thinking about, the only agenda is to grow these sports because we're changing lives for the better. If that's the agenda, everybody wins.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%. I am constantly having this conversation with our clients, because if you work with, let's say, your competitors, and you are all, you know what I found, and I'll end on this. There's a couple billionaires in my mastermind, and it's amazing to hear when they get up and talk, because their conversation is always, this is what I'm going to do next. But if that person goes and does it, then I'll move over here and do this and support them on that. Like there's just this abundant way of thinking, where it's like the puzzles keep fitting together, because there's a joint vision that we're moving towards, and nobody's really attached to how they do it. It's like, how can I help you? And let's do it. It's a powerful way to live.
Well, and it's like, it's not about my individual success. It's about team success. That's why it's been really fun when competitor, when we sold, we had 23 staff. Next thing you know, we have 500 staff. And then back at CAF, because I actually have an office at CAF now, and just, I'd never worked there. I'd always, just been there, or been around, because we had our competitor office was right down the street from CAF. So, and if you haven't been to our CAF building, you need to come by. It's pretty freaking amazing.
I have it. I would love to come by.
Our goal was, we told the architects, my partner Jeffrey Essica, who owns Flower Hill and is amazing, when it comes to the building and creating structures that are spectacular. He basically told the architect in this business park, well, I want our building to be different. And all of our athletes are missing body parts. They're in wheelchairs. They're flawed. We want this building to be as flawed as they are. We don't want one straight line in this building. It's raw beams. It's Bill Walton brought in the video screens from Sony and the solar tubes and to make it LEED certified. We did a film for 200 people last night. We showed our film, We Are Triathletes, which just launched last night. At the same time, we can do a dinner in that same room for 200, and we can do wheelchair basketball, wheelchair lacrosse, and volleyball there the next day. So it's this multi-purpose room that is spectacular. And we're back to my roots of 23 staff. And our whole finance department came over from Competitor Group when, a lot of them moved to Florida when they got bought by Ironman. So
yeah, I have one of them. I have Kelly Trimble, who used to be with us.
Well, Kelly started with us as our office manager and moved into sales. And that was always our philosophy. If you start at the front desk, you will learn our business. And we're not going to keep people from growing. We're not going to just bring people in from the outside. We want people who live and breathe competitor. And
she's a huge fan. She's a huge fan. So
well, it's mutual.
Very cool. Okay, so we will end there. Bob, is there any final last words of inspiration or motivation that you want to give our listeners as they're facing whatever they're facing, typically business, personal, whatever, that will help them actually overcome it and get to the other side?
I think the key is passion. Just follow your passion. Just there was times during our business when walking was getting hot and people were like, oh, you should get into walking and cover walking in the magazine. And it's like, no, that's not what we're about. You got to stay the course and not get distracted by every new trend. And this guy's doing this. If you believe in your gut, you're doing the right thing, just follow that. Don't listen to the outside noise. Your gut is always the best barometer for what to do next.
Yeah, I agree 100%. All right, Bob, thanks for being with us. It's been such an inspiration. Hold on just one moment as I just say goodbye to everybody. Thank you for watching Coffee with Shanda, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.